All right, everybody, welcome. This is the Otherppl Show. I'm Brad Listi. This is my podcast. I'm here in Los Angeles, and it's good to be with you. I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope everything's going okay out there wherever you happen to be. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen. You can also subscribe on YouTube, and you can follow me on social media. I'm on Bluesky and Instagram. I have a great episode for you today. My guest is Emma Pattee, author of a debut novel called Tilt, available right now from Marysue Rucci Books. Tilt is the official April pick of the Otherppl Book Club. The Otherppl Book Club is my book club. You can join my book club right now over at otherppl.com. I hope you do that. You get a new book every 30 days delivered to your door. I interview book club authors on this show. So you read the book and then you listen to the episode, or you listen to the episode and then you read the book. It's up to you, but it's an enriching and holistic literary experience. Before we get going, I do want to share that I'm going to be doing another Death March in conjunction with the LA Times Festival of Books, which is coming up in late April, April 26th and 27th. I did the first Death March when AWP was here just a couple of weeks ago, and it was a big hit, so I'm going to do another one. If you are out there and you're coming to town for the festival and you would like to join me for a guided hike in Griffith Park here in LA, you can do that. Just email me. The address is letters@otherppl.com. It's probably going to happen early in the morning on Saturday, April 26th. So circle that date, circle that time. And if you want to go along, there is already a little group forming. You can join us. The email address is letters@otherppl.com. A quick reminder that I do a weekly email newsletter. You can sign up for it over at bradlisti.substack.com. I also have a new company in the works. It is called Deep Dive, and it specializes in long-form educational audio. I've been talking about it. The debut course from Deep Dive, which is due to launch later this year, is called How to Write a Novel. And I'm the host of the course. I talk with dozens of today's leading writers, and it's a course that features more than 50 hours of never-before-heard content about how to write a novel. It's very exciting. So check out Deep Dive at www.deepdive.audio. You can sign up for the Deep Dive newsletter, and you can follow Deep Dive on Instagram and Bluesky. So my guest, once again, is Emma Pattee. Her debut novel is called Tilt, available from Marysue Rucci Books. Emma Pattee is a climate journalist and a fiction writer. Her work has been published in The Atlantic, The New York Times, The Washington Post, The Guardian, and other publications, and she lives in Oregon. She's an Oregonian, and we had a great talk. I'm very excited to share that with you right now. Tilt is an excellent debut. I was very invested in this novel, and it was great to meet Emma. So here we go. This is me in conversation with Emma Pattee. And you're from Portland? Mm-hmm. Like born and bred?
Yeah, in Southern Oregon, and then I came up here as a teenager. But yeah, no, I grew up outside of Ashland on this piece of land, yeah.
Up in the hills somewhere?
Yeah, like out by Emigrant Lake, up in yeah, and sort of on the way to Mount Ashland. And yeah, my parents bought 40 acres, and we lived in a tent for a while, and then my dad built this wood cabin, and yeah.
The full Oregon.
I am as hippie as they come. I really am.
Did it take for you? Like, I mean, is this something that you've integrated, or is it something you resisted? And then like when you're in high school, you're like, fuck this, I'm a capitalist, or no?
Oh my God, that's such a big question. We're not recording, right?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, okay. That's a great question. Did it take? I think that you can't grow up on the land, like kind of becomes inside of you in a way. Like it's like it's really hard to ever shake. I was homeschooled. I grew up in a very alternative way. I don't know that there would have been a way to go from that to sort of like full on, mega capitalism. But I certainly have sort of, I think, come more towards the middle, but maybe hard to ever shake those hippie roots.
I don't think it's that bad. I mean, I think it's like there's worse ways to grow up than to be close to nature and to be in a beautiful place. I mean, I'm sure it has its downsides, but it also had its upsides. Did you have siblings, or were you just like feral and running around by yourself?
We were very feral. Yeah, I have a brother, and we were very feral, and we were just totally running around wild. We had friends, other kids that were homeschooled, and it was a very cool way to grow up. And now that I have children, I really understand that it was such a cool way to grow up. And, my kids are like so into YouTube. They're so into movies. They're so into Transformers. They like have a grasp of pop culture that as a child, I wasn't allowed to watch TV. I wasn't really allowed to own any Disney products. And, we couldn't eat Nestle products. Like, we couldn't have Red Dye 40. We were just so removed from popular culture that, I think sometimes the answer I would have given you 10 years ago is different than the answer I would give you now, because now I have kids and I feel this sort of nostalgic pang for being able to grow up in that kind of a bubble. But, as a kid, it's hard to feel like you're sort of always on the outside of the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I don't let my daughter have social media, and all of her friends have it. And so she's like, yeah, and like that's how they like communicate and like make plans to socialize. And I'm still holding firm. I'm just like, no, this shit is toxic. I don't want this in your life. Like, until I'm going to protect you for as long as I can. I mean, maybe when she's like 16 or something, I'll relent. But I've tried to like keep her out of that for as long as possible, because I just feel like even if people aren't like bullying you or being like cruel in some overt way, you're still getting that like FOMO and all of this messaging, and the algorithm is sending you stuff, and I don't love it.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think it is. Yeah. I think it's like it feels like it's getting more and more dire, and the conversation around it is getting more dire. I don't know if you've watched Adolescence, but like every parent I know is texting me, you need to watch Adolescence. We need to talk about Adolescence. And so there's clearly a intense hub of sort of cultural panic about kids being, online and being exposed to this sort of cultural darkness. Which
you blessedly did not have any access to. And your parents were hippies, like, right? Like that's what because I'm trying to think generationally. They're baby boomers?
Yeah, they're boomers. My parents were journalists, and that's how they met. They met in Washington, D.C. as journalists. Then they moved sort of around the country, working at different papers. And then my dad sort of got into like the Silicon Valley, like tech boom, and got into that. And I think at some point I know at some point my parents said, screw this, we're done with this. They were done with the traffic. They were sort of done with like modern, in a sense, like modern life. And they were kind of this like original homesteader back way before anyone was doing that. And they bought 40 acres in Oregon, and that was totally off the grid. And we moved out there and just kind of, as a small child, and started to try to live in this really sort of off the grid way. Yeah. So I think, yes, my parents are definitely extreme hippies, but I think also my parents, they're very intellectual. They're very well traveled. I think maybe it's complicated. I think to be a really successful hippie, you in some ways have to really commit to the bit. And I don't know that my parents really could ever commit to the bit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of how I was. I looked like a hippie for about a year and a half of my life with like the hair and the whole thing. And then I was like, I look like shit.
Yeah, I can't do this. I know. I was teasing my dad the other day. My parents were car shopping, I don't know, like last year. And they were like, we think we're going to like buy an Audi. And I was like, you guys, like what? You can't buy an Audi? Like what happened to the hippies in the tent? And my dad goes, Emma, even hippies want to have a nice car. And I was just like, yeah, like listen, it is true.
I went to Boulder. Most of the hippiest hippies I know were wealthy.
Oh,
like some of them extravagantly so. And I'm like,
Rastafarians.
Trustafarians.
Trustafarians.
Yeah.
Thank you. Trustafarians. Yeah.
But there's a reason why all these kids can afford to like travel the country following like rock bands and shit. It's like, it's not because they're like selling grilled cheese in the parking lot usually, or maybe they are, but just for like fun.
Yes, right. So much of what we think there's so much ideological divide, but really the real divide is always class divide. And yeah, it took me a long time to understand that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that was my learning curve in college. I was like, oh, these people, they're so much fun to be around. They have like 4 homes, you know, or whatever. But your book is intense. And I found myself thinking as I was reading it that it's one of the most like embodied works of fiction that I can recall reading in recent memory. It made me think a lot about the body, I guess about the female body. I was like, by the end of this book, I felt like I was pregnant. I was like, oh my God, because you write about the body so well and about the experience of carrying a child. And I think the vividness of your imagination in the context of your story, which takes place essentially in the aftermath of a huge earthquake in Oregon. So you've got a woman who's 37 weeks pregnant. Her name's Annie. And she's like about to give birth and this earthquake hits. And so she's in this really tumultuous situation where it's kind of dystopia, like instant dystopia and wreckage everywhere and, you know, death and injury everywhere. And she's in her body and trying to deal with all of this in that state, which puts her at a heightened state of vulnerability. So do you agree with my assessment? Is there anything I left out?
It's actually flattering to hear you say that, because that was not maybe a strength I felt I had when I went into writing this book. And I had a lot of mentorship in that area. You know, I was working with 2 writers who came out of the like Tom Spanbauer, I think is his name. He did like the dangerous writing here in Portland. And he had this, I don't know him. This is all, you know, secondhand, but it sounds like he had this sort of very like on the body writing method. And then I worked really closely with 2 of his students, Lydia Yuknovich and Margaret Malone. And they were 2 of my mentors with this book. And so I think there was a lot of reminder to go back to the body, that when I get stuck, when I get lost, you know, because I would say earlier drafts of this essentially were like 100 pages of musing, you know, just like musing about capitalism, musing about the meaning of life. And so, you know, that really was something a muscle I was trying to build in writing this book. And yeah, I'm flattered to hear you say that it landed.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to hear that you worked with Lydia and Margaret, both of whom have been on this show before. Those are 2 good eggs. So you found good mentors.
Yeah. The story of my book has really been an enormous amount of mentorship and shepherding and guidance. You know, it's been like, for me, really, it has been like it takes a village to write a book. And as I've been promoting the book, it's been really interesting to hear how rare it is for writers to talk about that, and sort of maybe a discomfort around talking about books as collaborative. But for me, it's really important to call out all the mentorship.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think I maybe underestimated this earlier in my writing life, how critical it is to sort of subject your work to group mind well before you get to the publishing stage. Like I say it over and over again on this show, and it's really, really vital. I think a manuscript benefits greatly from outside input, and especially if you can have really skilled writers kind of vet what you've done and help you to polish it, it makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I think for me, it's also like when you have people who, you know, I don't know if this is the direction you want to take this, but I have actually also through writing this book become very anti-workshop. And so this book really was kind of dead in the water until I swore off writing workshops. And then once I swore off writing workshops, everything shifted in the project. And it was really only then that I was able to finish the book. So it's almost like I'm contradicting myself, but it has really been a collaborative effort. And yet I was not able to find what I needed in writing workshops.
What was it? What was going on in writing workshops that was not helpful?
I mean, my theory is that in a writing workshop, there's incredible writing workshops. My experience, and therefore my theory, and I have, been doing writing workshops for 15 years, is that oftentimes people are bringing in work that's way too early to come into a writing workshop because they don't really know what it is yet. And so to go into a writing workshop and say, is this working? Is like, well, what is it? And there's totally missing like an exploratory piece of things. I think also that writing workshops just by nature will always bring a work into the middle. There will always be an effect. And so if you're trying to do something different, something quirky, if you're trying to experiment and push yourself, a workshop, I think, will almost always try to bring you back to the median. And that's just because people have different taste. It's because we often can't really conceive of something we haven't seen before. And so, I essentially did like a straight year of workshops, maybe more with this book. And pretty much everyone was like, I don't get it. It's not working. I don't get it. And that was totally fair. What I was presenting did not make sense and was not working. And I was like, okay, but help me. This is my vision. How do I get there? How do I get there? And, really smart, earnest people tried. But I think that type of groupthink doesn't work great when you're trying to do something different.
Yeah, my experience in workshops has often been that I don't feel like very few people are giving a close and careful and considered read anyway. Everybody's just sort of like, oh, you got all these pages to go through and critique, and people want to tick the box and say they've done it. And so they'll skim through it and then come up with a couple of thoughts and give those to you. But this is like your baby and you're putting everything into it. And so I think a workshop or a little writing group can be effective, but it's got to be very well curated in terms of who's involved. Like if you have a small circle of people who are really giving time and energy to one another's work in good faith, and maybe if they have a certain sensibility that's complementary, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be the same,
Totally.
But it can work. But I hear you when it comes to workshops, because I've had kind of dissatisfying experiences, as well. But I think hiring a developmental editor or working with somebody like Lydia or Margaret who's experienced, like that can kind of streamline things and save you some time.
Yeah. I mean, I have a group of women in my life who I've known for about a decade, and they have been with me from the moment I had the idea for this book until, I spoke with them yesterday. They have helped me with every single decision I often say, during those months where I did stop believing in the project, wanted to give up on the project, they almost carried the dream of the project for me when I could not. And so my story has not been one of I'm brilliant and this idea is brilliant and I'm going to write this book. There's been so much doubt. There's been so many dead ends. And the only reason this is a book is just truly because there's just so many women in my life who have who have in different ways come into my life, not people that I have hired, people that are in my community and have helped me and have carried the project for me. And that, it's like flippant to be like, you got to go find yourself that community. And after sort of every reading I've done, people have come up to me and said, but how do I find that community? And it is really hard. It's taken me a long time, but I think it's incredibly invaluable to have that sort of creative support. And, one of my friends, we spent probably 4 hours on the phone together brainstorming the last line of the book. And to have a friend that you can talk to for 4 straight hours on the phone about the last line of your book, right? That level of creative intensity and collaboration, it's just it's a game-changing thing. And it's a, really remarkable thing.
No doubt. And I think, sometimes it can seem like, well, I don't have a community where I am. I guess that you can make them online too. It's not like you have to have a group of nerds in your town to hang out with and trade pages with. You can do this stuff virtually if you need to.
Totally. Most people I'm talking about don't live in Portland, right? They live in New York. And absolutely. And I think that probably 7 years ago, I would have said, well, I don't have a writing community. And so it is that it just takes a lot of time to build and to find people that share your sensibilities, to nurture those relationships. But I do think taking that out of the workshop setting, which is the main space most of us try to build writing community, is in the workshop setting. And I really don't believe that is the setting that can create a kind of a relationship where someone can push you like that and can help you like that.
So this is a disaster novel. That's how I would characterize it. And I was thinking about this. I was like, wow, I haven't read too many disaster novels recently. I'm sure there are plenty, but like I keep a pretty close eye on contemporary fiction and I haven't seen a lot of them. And then I was like, well, this is smart, because I was thinking that it was sort of in the zeitgeist, this idea of a massive catastrophic earthquake in the Pacific Northwest because of that New Yorker article that everybody read. Was that a point of genesis for you or no?
Won the Pulitzer. I mean, I think it's the point of genesis of any person living in Portland in 2015 of massive anxiety. Like, you know what I mean? It completely shifted the city. Well,
and let's talk about, for people who aren't aware of what we're talking about, can you just describe this article and what the deal is with this? What is it? The Cascadian fault line or whatever?
There's a really large fault line off the coast of Oregon, Washington. It goes up to British Columbia, goes all the way down to Northern California. And it is predicted that it will cause a very, very large earthquake about every few hundred years. And there's a 37% chance. We're basically overdue for it. There's a 37% chance that it will happen in the next 50 years. And it has the potential to be over a 9.0 magnitude earthquake. And when it does happen, it is predicted that it's going to be the worst natural disaster in the history of North America, in the recorded history of North America. So it's a pretty serious situation.
A 9 on the Richter scale. Like, you don't hear about that.
Yeah,
ever.
Higher than a 9. Yeah. So the earthquake in my book was a 9.2, and I think that's a pretty realistic guess.
And isn't that earthquake off the coast going to send a massive tsunami into like Portland and Seattle and stuff? Like, it's going to wipe out like huge sections of the city if it happens.
I mean, Portland and Seattle are both fairly removed from the coastline. Seattle has islands and inlets. And so basically the coastline, within about 15 minutes of the earthquake, the entire Oregon coast is going to have this massive tsunami wave. It could be as high as 100 feet high. And the entire coastline is just completely unprepared for this. I mean, I don't go to the Oregon coast. I certainly don't go with my children. The times that I have gone, I go alone and quickly.
So wait, you won't go with your kids to the Oregon coast because of this?
It's a very contentious point in my larger family because we're from here, and there is no Oregon childhood without the Oregon coast. It's incredibly sort of sentimental. It's a beautiful, incredible place, but there's also this incredible sentiment attached to any Oregon family. And I about before I started writing this book, when I was pregnant, I went for the very last time, and I said, "This is the very last time that I'll go." And I figured, this is so grim, I should not be saying this on a podcast, but my mental math, just to give you the mind frame I was in when I started writing this book, because I started writing this book a few weeks after that trip, my mental math was, if the tsunami comes, at least I'll die and my kid, at least we'll die together because my kid's still inside of me. And so, fine. But I cannot bear, once we are separated physically, I cannot bear it. And that's my kids have not been.
Wow. Both of them, interestingly, now that you're talking about this, both of my children are super freaked out about tsunamis. I don't even know why. I'm like, what? We go to the beach and my daughter's always like, is there a tsunami? I'm like, just relax.
Where do you live?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought you were still in Colorado. So I was very surprised. I mean, smart kids, man. I don't know. Kids know. Kids are onto something.
I guess. And this thing clearly has made an impression on you, and it's a source of anxiety. And I think also creative anxiety, because you've managed to write a novel. I mean, this really is what Tilt comes from, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say a few weeks after that trip, I was at IKEA, and the building, I was buying something for my kid or, for the nursery, whatever. And the building started to shake. And I thought, oh, it's the big one. I was sort of in that state of intense anxiety. And it was like a big truck that was backing up to the loading dock and had shaken the building. And as soon as the shaking stopped, I was like, oh, I'm going to write this book. Like the book was like arrived in my mind. And I called my mentor at the time and said, I have this book idea and I'm going to write it.
Did you read any disaster novels or watch disaster movies, or were you thinking about that little like subgenre at all when you started this?
No, it's so funny. I just don't think of this as a disaster novel. And so this is a new concept to me, now that the book is in the world. I think I was very interested in epistolary novels and stream of consciousness novels. So I read Duck's Newburyport by Lucy Ellman, I think. Yeah. And Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. I don't know if you've read that book. Oh, it's incredible book. And I really just started reading like every stream of consciousness novel that I could read. And that was more where my mind went with it. You're right. I don't know a lot of disaster novels.
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know a lot of disaster novels off the top of my head either. I think of movies maybe, that's where you usually see them, where there's like a huge wave coming. Or
I definitely did watch like Day After Tomorrow. Like I love stuff like that. I love Godzilla. Like I did spend a lot of time watching like destruction movies for inspiration, but yeah, not so much. I read The Road, which I'd obviously already read. Yeah. I did at one point feel like I really need to read some kind of a disaster book. And so I went and found this like YA thing, like I survived an earthquake. I survived a wildfire. And it was like these sort of YA adventure books. And so I read those to try to get some inspiration.
Well, I think it's a good idea. And it felt timely to me. I mean, I see a ton of like ecological climate fiction. Like that stuff is happening a lot. Which is natural. But I like the idea of just like the shit hits the fan in some really extreme way. That seems right for about right now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like IKEA collapsing and the earth shaking and the city turning into a dystopia in a matter of hours. Like that feels very 2025 to me. It feels well timed.
I mean, let me clarify. IKEA does not collapse. I pulled the building plans. It is a very safe building. I've spoken with IKEA management.
Oh.
We're all on the same page. It's a very safe building. But also I think as a climate journalist, this is actually how people experience climate change, is through a disaster like this. Climate change does not cause earthquakes, but this is actually how people experience climate change. Is they have, there's a massive flood, there's a hurricane, there's a wildfire. And they have an experience kind of like what Annie has in the book. And so, I think after all these years of like reporting on that, it really became clear to me, like, this actually is climate fiction in the way that most of us are actually going to experience climate change. I mean, you're in LA. And I think there's obviously amazing climate fiction being written that sort of is talking on a larger scale about things. But I really wanted to talk about what an everyday person's experience likely will be in the next, 5 to 10 years in living in most places in this country at risk of some kind of a natural disaster.
And I also had to note that having a pregnant protagonist is a savvy choice. We really should see more of this. Like I think of the movie Fargo, of course, like right off the top of my head, because that's really where in the popular culture where you had like a heroine who's pregnant. I was like, that felt new. It felt new to me then. I was like, oh, no one's really done this before. But it's just like such a sympathetic character just right off the bat to have a woman who's like in her third trimester and who's like really pregnant. And I don't know, but I think you'd probably agree, but I always feel like there is a sacredness to a pregnant woman. Like when I see a woman who's like very pregnant out in public, it's like, I try to get the door for people no matter what, but I will always like, if she needs something, you know what I'm saying? Like I think a lot of us are like that. And I don't know, there's something as a reader that really endeared me to her like right away. And like, you really care about her safety extra, you know what I'm saying? Because she's carrying a child.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That wasn't as much on my mind. But before writing this book, right, sort of as I started writing this book, I had really gotten into terror management theory. I don't know if you're familiar.
Wait, say it again.
Terror management theory.
Like terror as in like terrorism?
But not meaning that. But terror management theory is sort of about how much we try to not think about death and about the things. It's just a very growing body of research around like what we do when we are reminded of our death, and we shop more, we drink more, we have more sex. Like we do every bad thing when we are reminded of our death. And actually the research shows that even though, yes, we believe pregnant women are the sacred thing, right? Like you and I share this ideology. The research shows that actually people don't like seeing like women breastfeed or like seeing very pregnant women because they don't exactly know why, but that it somehow triggers this reminder of our own mortality, and kind of reminds us this like beast-like nature that of humans. And that was, I think, more what I wanted to play with, was this idea of like, she is so unavoidably animal. I really had this image of Annie moving from like a consumer. She just starts her journey as a consumer, and all she's thinking and talking about is consumption. All she's thinking about is what she's wearing, how much money she has, her credit card, the crib, that like she cannot stop thinking about consumption. And even after the earthquake, she cannot stop thinking about consumption. And then sort of I had this idea of like, how do you go from consumer back to your most beastly form?
Yeah, I mean, it gets like very Portland as the novel progresses. It does feel like she's got kind of going back to nature, right?
Yeah.
And the city is becoming feral. And like, hearing you talk about your childhood out in the wilds of Southern Oregon, like it starts to like become clear how this thing like assembled for you. And I mean, in terms of like how things go in the novel societally, I found myself reading it and thinking to myself, like, yeah, how would it go? I talked with David Koepp. He's primarily a screenwriter, but he's written some novels too. And he did a novel, 2-3 years ago, I think we spoke, and he had written about a kind of dystopian aftermath of a solar flare or a solar storm where like the entire power grid shuts down. Have you heard about this? This will add some.
Yeah, this is up my alley though.
I think double check me, but I want to say that there are like solar flares that cause like electromagnetic disruptions, and they happen with some frequency, but the effects are relatively minor and temporary. But I think we're due for a massive one. And the last one that happened was in the 19th century, which was sort of pre-electrification. And so if this next one happens, like it could shut everything down, like boom, like you're just kind of, you lose power and cell phones and like everything's, you just become like rewilded instantly, basically. And so that book was like, what will happen? Will there be like cooperative farming? Will neighborhoods come together, or will people be like fighting in the aisles of Rite Aid for like the last roll of toilet paper or whatever? And I'm curious about that part of your novel from an imaginative perspective, and maybe from a research perspective. Like, did you get into behavioral psychology, or did you study like disasters of yore and kind of look at how people behaved?
Yeah, I did. I think first off, I will definitely get that book. That's very much up my alley, sort of also speaks to my next project. But yeah, I think I started off really being angry about the road. And like I went to school in...
You mean the Cormac McCarthy novel?
Yeah. So I started off just being like really pissed off about that for reasons I couldn't articulate, that I've held since I was, a college freshman. And I came into like my first writing workshop at this liberal arts school in Boston. I was the scholarship kid, and we were told to like bring in our favorite book. And it was like every cool boy there had The Road, and it was like super worn, like that worn down page thing. And that was like the cool book. And, that whole was like a year where like nobody could use like a quotation mark. And so I always had kind of like begrudged The Road. And then as I started working on this book, I really, started to understand why The Road just does not present an accurate picture of what would happen after a disaster. And it's actually like kind of disturbing that The Road is considered like the sort of ecological breakdown text of our time, because it's like 300 and something pages long. And I think there's like 4 pages that have women mentioned. And like that just percentage wise does not feel right. That feels like a pretty intense choice. And this kind of narrative of like man with gun walks alone with child, I just immediately became obsessed with writing a counter narrative, and one that I thought was more true and that research actually supported. And the research really does support that. You know, it supports that after disasters, people, absolutely, there's looting and terrible things, and people are desperate and terrible things happen. But there also is like incredible acts of generosity. People tend to stick together. There's, I think, in some ways, like less stoicism and more like, or individualistic stoicism and more, you know, communal acts of goodness. And, you know, I leaned heavily on Rebecca Solnit's book, A Paradise Built in Hell. I leaned heavily on that book called...
Wait, what's that about? A Paradise Built in Hell?
It's basically about how, it's basically what it's exactly what I'm saying. That after, the historical record shows that after disaster, people actually act really generously and they come together. And that for some people, they experience more connection, more togetherness than they've actually ever experienced before. And that life in a non-disaster day is not set up for the type of connection and generosity that people get the chance to experience post-disaster. So it's this just really, really lovely visionary book and relying very heavily on the historical record.
Well, yeah. But I gotta interrupt because it's like when a disaster hits, what happens fundamentally, or one of the things that happens fundamentally, is that the gears of capitalism grind to a halt.
For a minute.
Mm-hmm. I mean, then there's the shock. Have you read The Shock Doctrine? I'm sure you probably have. The Naomi Klein about disaster capitalism.
Yeah. Okay. I have not read it, but my best friend's obsessed with Naomi Klein and is constantly telling me I need to read it.
Yeah,
so I'm excited.
I'm obsessed with her, but she makes a very compelling case that there are nefarious hyper-capitalistic forces in the world who actually seek out disaster as an opportunity to go in and capitalize, like when people are decimated and
absolutely
land is cheap and all this kind of stuff. And so I think that for the ordinary rank and file, though, like if there's a 9.2 earthquake in Portland, like there's going to be a period of days where people aren't like getting up and like rushing off to work. Right? You would think.
Yeah. Weeks, months. But yeah, exactly. There will definitely be a period of days. Absolutely.
You sort of saw that with the pandemic. And I think that was like one of the reasons why, like, I sort of in a perverse way kind of liked the pandemic, because I was like, oh, this is more relaxing. Like the number of possibilities has been dramatically reduced. The number of social obligations has been dramatically reduced. Like life feels in a weird way like calmer. And, you know, I always have to asterisk this and say I'm operating from a position of privilege. I was not a frontline worker and all this kind of stuff. But I just think that was the case for a lot of people and maybe a lot of writers. I've heard this over and over again with writers, where writers were like, yeah, I got it. Like people got work done because it was in some weird way more like life was like hermetically sealed, like literally and figuratively. And you couldn't go out. So it was like, okay, well, I got to stay at home and make something then.
Totally. And we saw so much activism come out of that, a lot of community, a lot of connection. You know, I had a funny experience. I had an experience like what you're describing. But my husband is a healthcare worker. And so he, has like PTSD from that time. And I had this experience where I had just gone back to work, I think the week before. So I had just finished my maternity leave and I had just gone back to work, maybe 2 weeks before. And then the pandemic happened and I was able to have like another, 6 to 9 months with my child. And it was just the most remarkable gift of my life. It was just an incredible gift, a gift I never would have given to myself, that I didn't even think I needed or wanted. And is now just one of like the precious, moments of my life. Yeah. And I got to work on this book every day during his nap. So
that's how it was written.
That's how it was written. Yeah.
During nap. How many? You have 2 kids?
I now have 2 kids. Yeah.
Boy and a girl, or boys?
2 boys. Yeah.
2 boys.
2 and 5. Yeah. Yeah. Both have been created in the time window that this book has existed. So it's been an intense 5 years.
That makes sense, though. This book is so concerned with motherhood and the concern of a mother for her child, and then just being, they're just in such physical peril. like I felt like this was a high concept novel. I say that as a compliment because I struggle so hard with that sort of thing. But I'm like, this could be a movie. This feels like it's got that energy to it. Was that intentional?
No, I mean, I think you could probably tell just talking to me, like none of this really was that intentional. You know, like I was a person who wouldn't go to the beach. So like if I could be operating from a more strategic, logical place, I would be. Though I do think it's logical to not go to the Oregon coast. But, you know, I think that no, this came from like the darkest pit of my anxiety. And I never really believed anybody would be that interested in it because it seems incredibly niche and it seemed a little bit deranged, honestly. And it's been a really wild experience to share my sort of this insane anxiety that was really taking over my mind, and then now make so many other people insanely anxious. You know, it's been sort of a wonderful, terrible thing.
Okay, so let's go over this. If you're on the Oregon coast, standing on the beach, I guess if the earthquake hits, you might feel the earth shake. But if this tsunami is coming, doesn't the ocean like retreat?
Mm-hmm. I mean, there will have been an over 9-point magnitude earthquake. You will 100% know that the earthquake has hit because it's off the coast, so it's going to hit the coast way harder than it would than you'd feel it in Portland.
Right.
And so so you'll absolutely know there's an earthquake, and then you will have about 10 to 15 minutes to get to high ground, and that high ground, you know, they have evacuation routes, they have signage. If you're going to go to the coast, you should absolutely download the evacuation map, and you should walk the route. Right whenever I get to town, I just had to go do an author talk there, and right when you get to town, I do the walk. I time the walk. And because I think, you know, so that it's one thing to look at it and it's another thing to literally walk it. And then, you know, you should put your shoes right by your bed, sleep in clothes that you can just kind of get up and go.
Wait, do you do this every night? Do you have shoes by your bed?
Well, when I go to the coast.
Oh, yeah. When you go to the coast.
But
okay.
No, you should also, if you live in anywhere where there are earthquakes, it's very common that you keep shoes by your bed. I have a friend that I think they're tied around her bedpost. She ties like some old sneakers because this may be an old fact. I don't know, but I believe the fact is that the number one injury after earthquakes is injury to your feet from running barefoot through glass and stuff. So it's just really common. You know, it's smart. You live in LA. Brad, do you not have shoes under your bed? I've
been through so many earthquakes and I'm like kind of like blasé about it. I'm like,
you're just chilling. You're just putting your feet up. Okay. I have a pet peeve, which is that I think so many people from California have moved to Oregon and to Portland that they are spreading blasé calm about the earthquake. Because when I will meet these people and they're like, but I'm from California. We know earthquakes. It's not that big of a deal. I've been through so many earthquakes. And I think because of, you know, the way the Richter scale works, that people have a really hard time conceiving that like a 6 magnitude earthquake and a 9 magnitude earthquake are not not even imaginably the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I think people here really don't understand that we're talking about the region being dismantled for what could potentially be years.
Wow. Okay, now I'm getting anxious. So if like the big one, because there is like the big one's going to hit in California too. Like there's the San Andreas fault or whatever it is.
You guys have your own big guy. Mm-hmm.
But it's not off the coast. I don't think it's like a tsunami delivery system. I really
don't know anything about it. I'm sorry.
You're never going to come to LA though. You couldn't even be here because if the big one hits,
I am going on book tour to LA in June. But
you going to wear a helmet? Like, what are you going to do?
No, I would love a minor earthquake. I love being places that aren't the Oregon coast and Portland. So I'm going to be so happy to be in LA, and your guys' buildings are way more up to date. You guys know what you're doing. Like I have so much confidence in California people and their ability to navigate earthquakes.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. I mean, you know, I guess the big one, that would be the test. My wife went to school out here and lived through the 1992 Northridge quake. That was the last one that really kind of fucked things up.
Yeah. I used a lot of first person accounts for the book from the Northridge earthquake.
What was that one on the Richter scale? What was that? Do you know?
I don't know.
I think in the 7s or something.
Yeah. And it really ends up being about how well built buildings are. And California has had in some ways the like good fortune of having enough large earthquakes that the buildings that can't withstand it have collapsed and gotten to be rebuilt.
And they're pretty strict codes, I think, in terms of like how you have to build in order to get permitted and stuff. You have to put things in place, but it's crazy to think about. And you mentioned earlier going off to college and kind of beginning your writing career, I think, or at least your pursuit of a writing career at that stage of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet you were homeschooled. Mm-hmm. Like, just out of curiosity, like, you were ready for college as a homeschooled kid?
I actually started college when I was 15. I was really a very nerdy little kid, and I was very driven. I was unschooled, which is a branch of homeschooling where the parents are basically like, go play in the woods, kid. And so I played in the woods a lot. And, from a young age, I always knew I wanted to be a writer. My parents really supported that. And, and I was just a very kind of nerdy little kid. And so I started college in Ashland at Southern Oregon University when I was 15. And then as soon as I was old enough to leave home, as soon as I was 18, I transferred and by then we moved up to Portland at that point. And so I transferred to a college on the East Coast. And so I graduated college, I think at 19. Yeah.
Okay. So wait, your whole family moved up to Portland?
Mm-hmm.
You left the 40 acres behind?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so now like like in the burbs basically, or?
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, we'd already moved into town. My parents got tired of the drive of driving us back and forth from our friends, because that will always win, right? Over anything, is that your kids want to be with their friends. Uh-huh. And so it was like, they'd moved from when we were very little, they'd moved from Southern California to Southern Oregon to avoid the traffic. And then they found themselves driving hours and hours a day so that their kids could be with their friends. So we moved into Ashland. And then when I was a teenager, we moved up to Portland. And then when I, was 18, I went to school in Boston.
So wait, I'm trying to place this in time. When were you living out in the sticks? Like, in this century, you were living in 21st century, were you living in the sticks?
I think we left the sticks in 2001 or 2. Yeah. Only because I can remember 9/11 happening in town in Ashland. And I can remember, that I could see, that I could watch 9/11 happening on my neighbor's TV. And so, yeah.
Did you ever meet a guy named Mookie in that area in Ashland?
Oh, I definitely know someone named Mookie.
He's a farmer. He's got a farm. He used to have a farm.
I think he's actually my brother's friend. I think they work together.
He had a goat farm outside of Ashland. He's a buddy of mine.
Oh, really? Okay, I'll text my brother. And I mean, Mookie, there's not going to be anyone else.
I don't know. There could be a rash of Mookies in Southern Oregon.
Maybe 2 tops. Ashland is a very, very small place, but I'll ask my brother.
So just out of this is just my curiosity, but like you're unschooled.
Yeah.
You're running around in the forest. Like, how do you learn how to spell? Do you learn basic math at any point, or no?
I went to Emerson in Boston. They actually don't teach math, and all you have to do is test out of the bare minimum of math in order to go to Emerson. And I think I tested like 1 point above. I was just always quite bad at math. My dad has a graduate degree in math. So I think this was like a real pain point, a real sadness that I have always just been really terrible at math. And I just kind of scrambled my way through. But, I test well, and that's kind of how you do it.
But I mean, like, that's crazy to me that you would test well, not having had any kind of formal education. You just picked.
There's a lot of kids who've had formal education that don't test well. I think testing well is a skill. It's not even a skill. It's a trait that we put way too much emphasis on. And I think fast, I test well. And I think that, a lot of teachers, what ended up happening is that I tested into AP high school English. And the AP high school English teacher said, yes, you would absolutely can join this class. And homeschoolers are allowed to take classes at the local school, at least in Ashland. But she said, but I can't let you in because these spots are reserved for high school seniors who deserve the AP credit, which is totally legitimate and fair. And so I went to the college in Ashland and said, well, AP English at the high school is technically beginning English at the college. English 101. So if I've tested into this, technically I actually can just take this. And in hindsight, it is bizarre. I mean, they definitely made me jump through a lot of hoops. I had to get a lot of teacher letters. I had to but I guess eventually they said, yeah, if you want to pay us, okay. And because of how colleges work, they can't only let you into 101 English. So they just had to make me a college freshman because, you sign up online, and my account let me sign up for any college freshman class. And so I just started going to college.
Nice. Yeah. Now it seems like a genius move. It seems like you're a genius if you start college at 15. That's what I automatically think.
I think people think I'm a genius. It has only worked against me because people are they never are more impressed by me than the moment they learn that fact. And from everything that happens after.
Yeah. It's you're like, actually she's normal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was a ambitious little kid. And so.
That's interesting that you would have all this ambition, out in the forest. But maybe that's the thing. It's because your parents didn't pressure you and you weren't inside the system. It was sort of self-directed. It just came from you.
I think and I think I touch on this in the book. I think I sort of subconsciously explored this in the book, that I think that, the ways that our parents have not been able to maybe achieve their ambitions or achieve their potential, and then maybe our grandparents and maybe our great grandparents, I do think becomes this sort of generational weight. And, my brother works at an NGO, and, he has this, is a really sort of worldly job. I do think that whether you live in the woods or whether you live, in LA, suburbia, I do think parental ambition sort of transcends all of that. And the way that rests on a kid really, really transcends all of that.
So wait, do your parents as journalists, did they have writerly or literary ambitions?
Yeah. I mean, I think my parents were they're very, very intelligent, very thoughtful, interesting people. I think they both had a lot of, potential that maybe didn't get fully realized, while they were also, I think, grappling with capitalism and wanting to live in the woods. And, I think my mom is an incredibly talented journalist. And when she got pregnant, she and another journalist, they worked for, I think, the San Diego Tribune, they went to their editor and said, can we split one reporter job? We'll split the salary. Can we split the reporter job so that we can have our kids and continue to have our careers? And he said no. And so my mom left her job, and there was not a concept of sort of, being a journalist that could also be with your kids. And, my grandmother also worked at the Washington Post, wanted to be a journalist. And then she got married and she quit her job. There was no question that she would continue working. And my great grandmother, wanted to be an opera singer. I think that there is a generational weight that I had to grapple with to write this book, and that Annie and her mother are also both grappling with in this book.
That's kind of a happy story in a way, the success that you're having, that you're having with this book. You've realized it. You've maybe realized some version of a dream that has been carried through the generations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my grandmother passed away right before I sold the book. And it was such a regret to me that she didn't see it fully realized, because, I have had these women my whole life saying shoot your shot, go for it. And that can be a really heavy weight, especially as I'm trying to do art. That can be a really heavy weight when you sit down to write every day. But I think I really, I speak about this in the acknowledgments in my book. I really think once I had a kid, I was like, oh, I cannot play small. I really do have to shoot my shot. And there felt I have to show my kids that I am willing to be in the ring. And yeah.
Yeah, I get that. When you have these children looking to you, and I think my theory of parenting, which is a very loosely formed theory, but it's just that what you do matters a lot more than what you say. And the example of your life is really the best teaching, right? That's it. It's not you it's certainly not me pontificating to my children. It's not going to do much good. But I think if you just carry yourself a certain way and approach life a certain way, live your day-to-day a certain way, that will translate much more powerfully than anything you tell them ever could. And I felt that same kind of pressure. Well, it's okay, if I understand that and believe that to be true, then what am I going to do?
Totally. I mean, I think very much speaks to this moment we're in where there's a clear need for activism and, there's a clear need to sort of stand up against fascism and, for me personally to stand up against genocide. And it is this moment of like, what am I willing to risk and what am I willing to do? And, it is really profound to think about your kids watching, though before we had kids, we should have been thinking about all the children watching. It should not require our own children watching to make that choice, but it certainly expedites that choice. Yeah,
it raises the stakes.
Mm-hmm.
And your novel certainly speaks to that. So you're in your 30s, this is your debut.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like this book was like a 10-year project. If we go back to that New Yorker article, like, is that...
I came up with the book idea in 2019.
Okay. So what does that put us at? 6 years?
That's about 6 years. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about, like, you go to Emerson and you're kind of taking classes. I guess your major was what?
Playwriting. Like Annie.
Like Annie. Okay. So you were a young you thought you were going to be like a Broadway person?
Definitely. Yes. I had sort of gotten a lot of acclaim in Portland. The college had won some awards. The college had sent me around and stuff. And so I definitely felt like I was going to be a star.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You were a prodigy.
I mean, you go to college at 15, everybody thinks you're a prodigy, and that is its own, weight.
Right. And so you're studying playwriting, and then talk about like what happened. Like you get out of college and then there's that big, like, well, okay, now what? And then you've got to try to figure it out, right?
Somebody asked me about this at like one of my book events, and I was like, oh, I really don't want to talk about this, but I'm getting it. I haven't spoken about it before, so I don't actually have a like polished answer to this. So bear with me. I graduated into the recession, and even before my senior year of college, my parents called me and said, like, we don't really have the money for you to keep going to this school. And I was going to drop out. And then the school ended up giving me an even bigger scholarship. They ended up just paying basically for my last year of school. And so I graduated into the recession, and I was really terrified. I really did not want to like scrape together. I did not want to be a starving artist. And I felt very faced with that. Like, either I go to Brooklyn and I believe in myself, or I don't, and I go back home. And I went back home, and I had this very pivotal moment when AWP was in Seattle about a decade and a half ago now. And I went to AWP, and some writer that I loved was there giving a talk, and she spoke to this whole room and basically said, writing is so hard. I go to all these events. No one's there. My books don't even sell. There's no money in it. This sucks. And this was a writer that I admired so much.
Who is it?
I cannot even remember, which is like, I'll go do some digging, because as I'm telling this, as I said, like, I promise you, this is not a polished answer, because I truly don't talk about this because I think it puts me in kind of a bad light, but I just felt so much like grief. It felt like it was so clear to me that my dream, which was to be a writer, was not a literal career. It was not a literal dream. And I think now, like, that's more in the common dialogue. I think probably back then it was also in the common dialogue, but I think I had absorbed a lot of prodigy stuff. I think I had absorbed but of course I can have it all. I think my parents, whatever, they were capitalists turned hippies. And so they didn't really want to talk about the practical ways that you pay your bills, because they weren't maybe making practical decisions about how to pay bills. And, it just shook me so much that like, this was a person I would dream to be and dream to write like, and they were telling me that this sucked. And I left AWP that day, drove home, cried the whole way home, got back to Portland, and told the guy that I was dating at the time, I am done writing. I'm done. I'm not talented enough, and I'm not committed enough. It's a dead end for me. And I don't want to be a starving artist. And I just stopped writing.
And how old were you?
22.
So you went to college at 15, you retired at 22. So
22. I already gave up by 22. I already tried. I know. Isn't that so? It's like, that's why I hate telling this story. Cause like, it's so earnest. I have such a clear memory of the moment, and I felt it so earnestly, but it's like such a cringy story to tell because I was 22.
I get it though. And I feel like, we go through moments as writers where we're really down on it, and then we might be a little bit more positive at other times. And it can certainly feel like this entire game is sort of like playing the lottery. Like the people who get the golden ticket and sell a cajillion copies of their books, like things are sweet for them. And that's the 1%, right? Or maybe even like a fraction of 1%. Everybody else is just like fighting like dogs in the streets for scraps.
Yeah, I don't know exactly that it is a viable career. My life has gotten, I think, a lot better now that and I'm so grateful I gave it up at 22 because I didn't want to be a writer. I wanted to be famous. I wanted to affirm that I was a child prodigy, and I wanted to affirm my specialness and uniqueness. And like, thank God I stepped away from that and came back to it from a place that felt just so completely different. And with an acceptance that this is just, I don't think really a viable, stable career.
I mean, it can be, but I think going into it expecting anything is maybe a fool's errand. And I'm curious to know, like you retire at 22. How long were you out? How long did you stop writing for?
I think I started writing again when I was maybe like 26 or 27, which also just sounds ridiculous. I remember for me, it was like, I'm coming back to it. Like and all the time I'd lost, because of course I only wanted to be like 30 under 30. Like I didn't care about writing. I just cared about the fame and how it looked. And so, so I think, I don't know, it was 26, 27, and I started writing again and really fell back in love with it and started sort of writing short stories and submitting them to literary journals and just so much committing to the practice of it in a really different way.
Okay. So yeah, that's like a 4 or 5 year window of time where you were doing other things. Like I'm imagining like working some job and just kind of living your life.
Yeah. Started working in marketing.
What changed? Like what shifted and brought you back to writing? And what were some of the fundamental things that shifted in terms of your approach?
Yeah. It's I won't get too much in the details because it's a personal story and sort of and involves other people in my life. But I had a real intense, I guess personal tragedy is maybe like the best way to say it. And it arrived to me much like the thing I was sort of exploring this book. Like it was a shock point. It was a shock point of my life. And in that moment, I was just sort of became very aware of how fragile life is. And almost the first thing I thought was, I can't believe I gave up writing. I can't believe I'm not doing the one thing I love to do. And I think through that lens, which you can see, there's obviously so much of this in the book. This is not really something I've spoken about before, but that through that lens, you can come back to writing from like such a different place, because in those moments, like fame stuff kind of does melt away. And like how you look and how you appear kind of does melt away. Like when you have when your life really gets turned upside down like that, I think that you just like have this chance to see clearly what's important. And for me, it just became really clear that that's what was important to me.
And so this was like a loss that you experienced, like without having to go into like the nitty gritty of it. Like, I'm just curious to know like what reframed things for you.
Yeah, it was a loss. And it just sort of gave me this gift of reframing that I ran with.
So you came back to the writing and you were less concerned with this like affirmation process and also all the trappings of the external, which like, it feels very just human now in terms of the social media of it all and the FOMO of Instagram and blah, blah, blah. Like it's not, it just seems like maybe heightened. I guess it's always sort of been there. Writers have always been concerned with external validation, but it just feels like maybe for somebody who's a millennial coming up and sort of like coming of age in this online world, yeah, those markers like the 5 under 35 and, being profiled in whatever magazine or, being reviewed by Dwight Garner and, like all this stuff. you start to be like, well, if I don't tick these boxes, I'm a failure. And like, this is the path, like this is the dream. And then something like super difficult or existential happens. And there is that clarifying effect, right?
I mean, that was very much like what I wanted to give Annie. And I think I felt very much, I was sort of intrigued by this idea of like being really stuck and the way that modern life sort of makes us stuck. And what would it take to get a woman like Annie to change her life? And I think it really would take like a massive earthquake. I think it really took something that fundamental to get Annie to make a change and to see what actually matters.
Yeah, I've had that thought many times where you're like, I'm considering just like the problems that we are faced with as a species, so many of which are self-inflicted, and like just thinking about the state of the world and ecological catastrophe and the fascism and the, all of it, and just going like, what's it going to take for this big consciousness shift that clearly needs to happen? Like this reordering, this rethinking of how we approach existence and just the collective conundrum of being a human on this earth. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
totally.
There needs to be a rethinking. Like, what's it going to take? And it's sort of like, I think it's going to take something horrible.
I don't know that there's any, I mean, we've already had so many horrible things happen. I don't know that there's, I wonder if it's ever gonna, I think it might be some sort of like a Darwinism. Our brains just are not evolved for what it would take. And, but I think the same thing. I started this book feeling so angry about like climate apathy and how it seemed like little people cared. This is like back in 2019, people really weren't talking about climate change. Like that really became a big topic during COVID and then since. I think writing this book really gave me a lot of compassion for the ways that like we just have these animal brains. Our brains are not designed to prepare for earthquakes. They're not designed to think about, sort of vague and complex, ominous threats coming towards an entire species. And yeah, I finished this book having, I think, a lot more compassion and a lot more acceptance around what's happening right now ecologically.
And just like how fucked up people are. Like we're all doing, I think like this is sort of like the grim truth. It's also just maybe cause for compassion. It's like everybody really is, for the most part, doing their best.
I mean, I think we're headed into Brene Brown territory, and I'm here for it.
Is that Brene Brown?
That's Brene Brown's big thing, and I think she's on to something. Oh. Yeah.
So, me and Brene Brown.
You guys,
unbeknownst to me, we have synergy.
You have synergy. I mean, I'm sure Brene Brown cannot claim the statement, everyone's doing their best, which, has been said for a long time. But yeah, I guess I really like truly we are just animals with animal brains. We're very reactive. We think we're logical, but we're totally not logical. And we don't make decisions logically. Like I don't really think we make free decision, period. We move as a pack. So much of what happens for us is happening physiologically and subconsciously, but we're like, no, that's my identity. That's my choice. That's my personality. That's my whatever, my decision. And so I think that I don't believe that it's that we are so fucked up. I just think that we are so outmatched by the situation. And there's something to me very endearing. Like writing this book, I have fallen back in love with humankind. I have come to feel like that's something incredibly endearing about these like animals with like big mouths and credit cards. And they're just doing their crazy thing and calling it logic.
Just swiping their way toward oblivion.
Yeah.
Well, what about playwriting? Like, I mean, you've got this book done. Do you have other stuff in the works? You've come back to writing and you've got this new approach that's like more divorced from ego, than maybe previous approaches were. And you I think you found a way to the work that is productive. Like, do you have other books in the pipeline? Are you going to write a play and try to do the Broadway thing?
No, I don't think so. I don't know about that. Yeah, I do have another project in the pipeline. And something I know people listening who are in the writing space, like I sold this book 2 years ago. So, it's coming out now, but for me, that it I sort of shifted to the next project 2 years ago. And so I do really have something in the works. And also, I'm really hoping to come back to be able to work on bigger investigative pieces related to climate change. I just did a big investigative piece for the local paper here about brick schools and how they're not prepared for the earthquake. And they ran that investigative piece alongside the chapter of my book that happens at a brick school. And so I'm starting to get more involved here locally, talking about the issue of brick buildings and brick schools. And then in a larger sense, I have some investigative pieces I want to work on. And then, continuing to work on fiction and see what's next.
Is there a manuscript in the works, or just early stages? There is a manuscript.
Yeah, there is a manuscript. I don't know how good it is. I don't know how ready it is, but there is a manuscript.
Any hints as to what it entails?
Okay, no, but this is what I'm going to say. Two things. Rewilding. You brought up the word rewilding, which is a key word here for me. The other thing is, I think that is in some ways connected to what you were talking about, the book you were recommending to me. So it's in that kind of space.
So it's kind of ecologically concerned. That's like continuing this thread.
I think maybe continuing the thread of the animals with big mouths and credit cards. I think that is more. I think I have more of an interest for me in the psychology behind disaster and climate and ecological breakdown, and maybe less concerned with the exciting, epic disaster of the disaster.
I think Animals with Big Mouths and Credit Cards would be a good title. I'm just going to flag that.
Okay. I'll text Simon & Schuster. I'll be like, guys, Brad and I, synergy.
I was going to say, just came up with something brilliant.
We got this.
Well, it's a delight to speak with you, and I want to congratulate you on this book. I'm glad we got to spotlight it in the book club, and I wish you well on all of the above, and I wish you safety up there in the Pacific Northwest.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brad. I really appreciate that. What a gift it has been to chat with you. And if you come to Portland and the earthquake happens, you can come to my house for water.
Okay.
Highest honor.
Okay, everybody, there we have it. That was my conversation with Emma Pattee. Her debut novel is called Tilt, and it is available now from Marysue Rucci Books. Tilt is an excellent debut. It's intense. It's a page-turner. It will make you palpitate. Tilt is also the official April pick of the Otherppl Book Club. A reminder that if you want to sign up for the book club, you can do so over at otherppl.com. You can find Emma Pattee on the internet at emmapattee.com, and you can follow her on Instagram and Bluesky. One more time, her debut novel is called Tilt. Go get your copy immediately. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen. You can also subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Bluesky. Sign up for my newsletter, bradlisti.substack.com. And if you love this show, if you listen regularly, I hope you will join the Otherppl Patreon community. I need your support. You can do that at patreon.com/otherpplpod. Again, that's patreon.com/otherpplpod. Help keep this show going into the future. If you want to join the book club or get an Otherppl t-shirt, just go to the show's official website, otherppl.com. If you want to check out my new company, it is called Deep Dive. The website is www.deepdive.audio. You can sign up for the Deep Dive newsletter while you're there, and you can follow Deep Dive on Bluesky and Instagram. If you have 2 minutes and you want to do me a quick favor, please give this show a rating wherever you listen. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, rate it, review it. It helps the show in the algorithm. It helps it find new listeners. Okay, so coming up on Thursday, I will be back once again with my friend and co-host Mira Gonzalez for a brand new episode of Brad and Mira for the Culture, our weekly conversation about popular culture. Mira is a millennial. I'm Gen X. I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to popular culture. Mira knows a lot. She watches like Real Housewives and stuff, and she teaches me things. So it's a fun show. It's a hangout show. It's the kind of show you turn on while you're cooking or cleaning, and you just listen to it. It's a break from all the bad news, right? Sometimes we just need to listen to stupid bullshit. So check it out on Thursday, the latest episode of Brad and Mira for the Culture. It is about to happen. Wait for it. Stay tuned.